Chapter 12. When vitality sags, try this health formula. A woman, so I have heard, went into a drugstore and asked for a bottle of psychosomatic medicine. Such medicine, of course, is not found on drugstore shelves, for it does not come in pills or bottles. But there is a psychosomatic medicine just the same, and many of us need it. It is a prescription compounded of prayer, faith, and dynamic spiritual thinking. It has been variously computed that from 50 to 75% of present-day people are ill because of the influence of improper mental states on their emotional and physical makeup. Therefore, such a medicine is of great importance. Many people who are below par will find that there is a health formula which, in addition to the services of their physicians, can be of great value to them. The manner in which spiritual and emotional treatment can restore declining vitality is illustrated by the sales manager referred to us by the head of a large company. This sales executive, formerly a man of outstanding efficiency and energetic driving power, experienced a serious decline both in ability and energy. He lost his creative skill. Previously, his sales ideas had been unique and outstanding. It soon became noticeable to his associates that this sales manager was slipping badly. He was urged to consult a doctor, and the company sent him to Atlantic City for a rest and later to Florida for a second attempt at recovery. Neither of these vacations seemed to be productive of any definite improvement. His physician, who knew about our psychiatric clinic, recommended to the company president that this sales manager come to us for an interview. The president asked him to come, which he did, but he was rather indignant at being sent to a church. "This is a pretty pass," he fumed, when they send a businessman to a preacher. "I suppose you are going to pray with me and read the Bible," he said irritably. "I wouldn't be surprised," I answered, "for sometimes our trouble lies in an area where prayer and the therapy of the Bible can have an important effect." He proved most sullen and uncooperative, until finally I was forced to say to him, "I want to tell you bluntly that you had better cooperate with us or you're going to be fired." "Who told you that?" he demanded. "Your boss," I replied. "In fact, he says that unless we can straighten you out, as much as he regrets it, you are going to be through." You never saw such a stunned expression on anybody's face. "What do you think I ought to do?" he stammered. "Often," I replied, "a person gets into the state in which you find yourself because the mind is filled with fear, anxiety, tension, resentment, guilt, or a combination of all of them. When these emotional impediments accumulate to a certain weight, the personality cannot support them any longer and gives way. Normal sources of emotional, spiritual, and intellectual power become clogged up. So a person becomes bogged down by resentment, by fear, or by guilt. I do not know your trouble, but I would suggest that you think of me as a sympathetic friend with whom you can be absolutely confident and that you tell me about yourself." I emphasized that it was important he conceal nothing, and that he completely empty himself of whatever fears, resentments, or guilt feelings might be in his mind. "I assure you that our interview will be held in strictest confidence. All your company wants is to have you back, the same highly efficient person you were." In due course the trouble came out. He had committed a series of sins, and these had involved him in a complicated maze of lies. He was living in fear of exposure, and all in all, it was the most pathetic mass of inner confusion. It came little short of mental filth. It was rather difficult to get him to talk, for he was essentially a decent person and had a strong sense of shame. I told him that I understood his reticence but that this operation had to be performed and that it could not be accomplished without a thorough mind emptying. When it was all over, I shall never forget the manner in which he reacted. Standing on his feet, he began to stretch. He stood on tiptoes, reaching his fingers toward the ceiling, and then took a deep breath. "My," he said, "I feel good." It was a dramatic expression of release and relief. Then I suggested that he pray and ask God to forgive him and to fill him with peace and cleanness. "Do you mean for me to pray aloud?" he asked dubiously. "I never did that in my life." "Yes," I said, "it is a good practice and will strengthen you." It was a simple prayer, and as best as I can recall it, this is what he said: "Dear Lord, I have been an unclean man, and I am sorry for the wrong I have done. I have poured it all out to my friend here. I now ask you to forgive me and to fill me with peace. Also make me strong, so that I will never repeat these actions. Help me to be clean again and better, lots better." He went back to his office that very day. Nothing was ever said to him, and it did not need to be, for soon he got back into stride and is one of the best sales managers in his city today. Later I met his president, who said, "I don't know what you did to Bill, but he is certainly a ball of fire." "I did nothing. God did it," I replied. "Yes," he said, "I understand. Anyway, he is the old-time Bill." When this man's vitality sagged, he tried a health formula that restored him to normal efficiency. He took some psychosomatic medicine which cured him of an unhealthy spiritual and mental condition. Dr. Franklin E. Bond of the University of Colorado Medical School maintains that 1/3 of all cases of illness in general hospitals are clearly organic in nature and onset. 1/3 are a combination of emotional and organic, and 1/3 are clearly emotional. Dr. Flanders Dunbar, author of Mind and Body, says, "It is not a question of whether an illness is physical or emotional, but how much of each." Every thoughtful person who has ever considered the matter realizes that the doctors are right when they tell us that resentment, hate, grudge, ill will, jealousy, vindictiveness are attitudes which produce ill health. Have a fit of anger and experience for yourself that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach, that sense of stomach sickness. Chemical reactions in the body are set up by emotional outbursts that result in feelings of ill health. Should these be continued either violently or in a simmering state over a period of time, the general condition of the body will deteriorate. In speaking of a certain man whom we both knew, a physician told me that the patient died of grudgitis. The physician actually felt that the deceased passed away because of a long-held hatred. He did his body such damage that his resistance was lowered, the doctor explained, so that when a physical malady attacked him, he did not possess the stamina or renewing force to overcome it. He had undermined himself physically by the malignancy of his ill will. Dr. Charles Minor Cooper, a San Francisco physician, in an article entitled "Heart to Heart: Advice About Heart Trouble," says, "You must curb your emotional reactions. When I tell you that I have known a patient's blood pressure to jump 60 points almost instantaneously in response to an outburst of anger, you can understand what strain such reactions can throw upon the heart. One who is quick on the trigger," he wrote, "is likely to blame someone else impulsively for a fault or mistake, when it would be wiser simply to avoid being so much disturbed by what is done and is therefore unavoidable." He quoted the great Scottish surgeon John Hunter. Dr. Hunter had a heart condition himself, and a thorough understanding of the effect of strong emotion on his heart. He said that his life was at the mercy of anyone who could annoy him. and in fact his death resulted from a heart attack caused by a fit of anger when he forgot to discipline himself. Dr. Cooper concludes, whenever a business problem starts to vex you or you begin to get angry, let yourself go limp all over. This will dissipate your mounting inner turmoil. Your heart asks that it be permanently housed in a lean, cheerful, placid man who will intelligently curb his physical, mental, and emotional activities. So if you are under par, I suggest that you do a very scrupulous job of self-analysis. Honestly, ask yourself if you are harboring any ill will or resentment or grudges, and if so, cast them out. Get rid of them without delay. They do not hurt anybody else. They do harm to the person against whom you hold these feelings, but every day and every night of your life, they are eating at you. Many people suffer poor health, not because of what they eat, but from what is eating them. Emotional ills turn in upon yourself, sapping your energy, reducing your efficiency, causing deterioration in your health. And of course, they siphon off your happiness. We realize today the effect of thought patterns upon physical states. We realize that a person can make himself ill by resentment. We know he can develop various kinds of physiological symptoms because of a sense of guilt. Also, one may show definite physical symptoms as a result of fear and anxiety. We know that healing has been accomplished when the thoughts are changed. Recently, a diagnostician told me of a young woman who was admitted to a hospital with a temperature of 102 degrees. She had a definite case of rheumatoid arthritis. Her joints were badly swollen. In order to study the case thoroughly, the doctor gave her no medication except a slight sedative to relieve the pain. After 2 days, the young woman asked the doctor, "How long will I be in this condition, and how long must I remain in the hospital?" "I think I must tell you," replied the physician, "that you will probably be in the hospital for about 6 months." "You mean it will be 6 months before I can get married?" she demanded. "I am sorry," he said, "but I cannot promise you anything better than that." This conversation took place in the evening. The next morning the patient's temperature was normal and the swelling was gone from her joints. Unable to account for the change, the doctor observed her for a few days, then sent her home. In a month she was back in the hospital in the same condition as before. Temperature 102, joints swollen. Counseling disclosed that her father insisted that she marry a certain man who would be an asset to him in his business connections. The girl loved her father, wanted to do as he wished, but did not want to marry a man whom she did not love. So her subconscious mind came to her assistance and in effect gave her rheumatoid arthritis and a temperature. The doctor explained to the father that if he forced this marriage, his daughter could become an invalid. When told that she need not go through with the marriage, the girl's recovery was quick and permanent. Do not get the idea that if you have arthritis, you are married to the wrong person. This incident merely illustrates the profound effect of mental pain on physical conditions. I was interested to read a statement by a psychologist that infants can catch fever and hatred from people around them more quickly than they can catch measles or other infectious diseases. The virus of fear may burrow deeply into their subconsciousness and remain there for a lifetime. But, adds the psychologist, fortunately infants can also catch love and goodness and faith and so grow up to become normal, healthy children and adults. In an article in the Ladies' Home Journal, Constance J. Foster quotes Dr. Edward Weiss of Temple University Medical School in a speech to the American College of Physicians in which Dr. Weiss stated that chronic victims of 202 pains and aches in the muscles and joints may be suffering from nursing a smoldering grudge against someone close to them. He added that such persons usually are totally unaware that they bear a chronic resentment. To clear up any possible misunderstanding, the author continues, it is necessary to state emphatically that emotions and feelings are quite as real as germs and no less respectable. The resultant pain and suffering of diseases caused primarily by the emotions are no more imaginary than those caused by bacteria. In no case is the patient consciously to blame for developing the disease. Such persons are not suffering from any disease of the mind, but rather from a disorder of their feelings, often linked to a marital or parent-child problem. In the same magazine article, the story is told of a certain Mrs. X who came to the doctor's office complaining of a breaking out on her hands which was diagnosed as eczema. The doctor encouraged Mrs. X to talk about herself. It developed that she was a very rigid person. Her lips were thin and unyielding. She was also rheumatoid. The doctor sent Mrs. X to a psychiatrist, who saw at once that there was some irritating situation in her life which she was translating outwardly in the form of a skin rash, thus taking out on her own person the urge to scratch something or someone. The doctor finally put it to her bluntly. "What is eating you?" he asked. "You're peeved at something, aren't you?" She stiffened up like a ramrod and marched right out of the office. So I knew I'd hit the target too closely for comfort. A few days later she came back. Due to the agony of the eczema, she was ready to let me help her even if it meant she had to give up a hate. It turned out to be a family row over a will, with Mrs. X feeling she had been treated unfairly by a younger brother. When she got rid of the hostility, she got well, and when she made up the quarrel with her brother, within 24 hours the eczema vanished. That there is even a relationship between emotional disturbance and the common cold is indicated by Dr. L. J. Saul of the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, who has made a study of this subject. Emotional disturbances are believed to affect the blood circulation in the linings of the nose and throat. They also affect glandular secretions. These factors make the mucous membranes more susceptible to attack by cold viruses or germ infection. Dr. Edmund P. Fowler, Jr. of Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons stated, "There are colds which develop in medical students at the time of their examinations, and colds which develop in many persons before or after a trip. Colds develop in housewives when they must care for a large family, and one often sees a cold develop in a patient when his mother-in-law comes to live in the house, and it often disappears when she leaves." Dr. Fowler does not specify the effects on the mother-in-law of a daughter-in-law or son-in-law. Perhaps she has a cold also. One of the cases Dr. Fowler reports concerned a 25-year-old salesgirl. When she visited his office, her nose was stuffy, the lining was red and congested, and she suffered from a headache and a mild temperature. These symptoms had persisted for nearly 2 weeks. Questioning disclosed that they had started a few hours after a violent quarrel with her fiancé. Local treatments cleared up the cold, but the young woman was back in a few weeks with another attack. This time the trouble had started after an argument with the butcher. Again local treatments brought relief, but the girl continued to have recurring colds, and each time they were traced to a fit of anger. Finally, Dr. Fowler was able to persuade the girl that her bad temper was at the root of her chronic cold symptoms. When she learned to lead a calmer existence, her sneezes and sniffles disappeared. And yet people still think that when the Bible tells you not to hate or to get angry, that it is theoretical advice. The Bible is not theoretical. It is our greatest book of wisdom. It is filled with practical advice on living and on health. Anger, resentment, and guilt make you sick. Modern physicians tell us, which proves once again that the most up-to-date book on personal well-being is the Holy Bible, neglected by so many or regarded by them as purely a religious book and certainly as one that is not practical. No wonder more copies are read than all other books. That is because in this book we discover not only what is wrong with us, but how to correct it as well. Dr. Fowler calls attention to the emotional colds suffered by children who feel insecure. He reports that many cases of chronic colds occur in children who come from broken homes. An older child often has recurring respiratory infection when a new baby is born because he feels neglected and jealous. A 9-year-old boy had an extremely dictatorial father and an indulgent mother. The conflict between the strictness of one parent and the leniency of the other obviously was disturbing to the child. He particularly feared punishment by his father. This boy suffered for several years from continuous coughs and sniffles. It was noted that the colds disappeared when he went to camp, away from his parents. Since irritation, anger, hate, and resentment have such a powerful effect in producing ill health, what is the antidote? Obviously, it is to fill the minds with attitudes of goodwill, forgiveness, faith, love, and the spirit of imperpetuability. And how is that accomplished? Following are some practical suggestions. They have been used successfully by many in counterattacking especially the emotion of anger. A consistent application of these suggestions can produce feelings of well-being. 1. Remember that anger is an emotion, and an emotion is always warm, even hot. Therefore, to reduce an emotion, cool it. And how do you cool it? When a person gets angry, the fists tend to clench, the voice rises in stridency, muscles tense, the body becomes rigid. Psychologically, you are poised for fight. Adrenaline shoots through the body. This is the old caveman hangover in the nervous system. So deliberately oppose the heat of this emotion with coolness. Freeze it out. Deliberately, by an act of will, keep your hands from clenching. Hold your fingers out straight. Deliberately reduce your tone. Bring it down to a whisper. Remember that it is difficult to argue in a whisper. Slump in a chair, or even lie down if possible. It is very difficult to get mad lying down. 2. Say aloud to yourself, "Don't be a fool. This won't get me anywhere, so skip it." At that moment, it may be a bit hard to pray, but try it anyway. At least conjure up a picture of Jesus Christ in your mind and try to think of him mad just as you are. You can't do it. And the effort will serve to puncture your angry emotions. 3. One of the best techniques for cooling off anger was suggested by Mrs. Grace Ausler. She formerly employed the usual count to 10 technique, but happened to notice that the first 10 words of the Lord's Prayer worked better. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. When angry, say that 10 times and your anger will lose its power over you. 4. Anger is a great term expressing the accumulated vehemence of a multitude of minor irritations. These irritations, each rather small in itself, having gathered force by reason of the one being added to the other, finally blaze forth in a fury that often leaves us abashed at ourselves. Therefore, make a list of everything that irritates you, no matter how inconsequential it may be or how silly each is. List it just the same. The purpose in doing this is to dry up the tiny rivulets that feed the great river of anger. 5. Make each separate irritation a special object of prayer. Get a victory over each, one at a time. Instead of attempting to destroy all of your anger, which, as we have pointed out, is a consolidated force, snip away by prayer each annoyance that feeds your anger. In this way, you will weaken your anger to the point where presently you will gain control over it. 6. Train yourself so that every time you feel the surge of anger, you say, "Is this really worth what it is doing to me emotionally? I will make a fool of myself. I will lose friends." In order to get the full effect of this technique, practice saying to yourself a few times every day, "It is never worth it to get worked up or mad about anything." Also affirm, it isn't worth it to spend $1,000 worth of emotion on a 5-cent irritation. 7. When a hurt feeling situation arises, get it straightened out as quickly as possible. Don't brood over it for a minute longer than you can help. Do something about it. Do not allow yourself to sulk or indulge in self-pity. Don't mope around with resentful thoughts. The minute your feelings are hurt, do just as when you hurt your finger. Immediately apply the cure. Unless you do so, the situation can become distorted out of all proportion. So put some spiritual iodine on the hurt at once by saying a prayer of love and forgiveness. 8. Apply grievance drainage to your mind. That is, open your mind and let the grievance flow out. Go to someone you trust and pour it out to him until not a vestige of it remains within you. Then forget it. 9. Simply start praying for the person who has hurt your feelings. Continue this until you feel the malice fading away. Sometimes you may have to pray for quite a while to get that result. A man who tried this method told me that he kept account of the number of times he needed to pray until the grievance left and peace came. It was exactly 64 times. He literally prayed it out of his system. This is positively guaranteed to work. 10. Say this little prayer. May the love of Christ fill my heart. Then add this line. May the love of Christ for blank, insert the other's name, flood my soul. Pray this, mean it, or ask to mean it, and you will get relief. 11. Actually take the advice of Jesus to forgive 70 times 7. To be literal, that means 490 times. Before you have forgiven a person that many times, you will be free of resentment. 12. Finally, this wild, undisciplined, primitive urge in you, which flames to the surface, can be tamed only by allowing Jesus Christ to take control. Therefore, complete this lesson by saying to Jesus Christ, "Even as you can convert a person's morals, so now I ask you to convert my nerves. As you give power over the sins of the flesh, so give me power over the sins of the disposition. Bring my temper under your control. Give me thy healing peace in my nervous system as well as in my soul." If you are beset by temper, repeat the above prayer 3 times every day. It might be advisable to print it on a card and put it on your desk, or above the kitchen sink, or in your pocketbook.